Hi folks, Steve from the Pistol Place here with another replica review, and this time it's the Umarex Colt Single Action Army. This is an almost all metal replica other than for the grips and some internal parts. It's a very good visual replica of the original revolver, and one thing I do like about it is that it's nicely weighted. It feels close to the weight of the original, which is strange because on the box, as you can see here, simple card box, that's what it comes in. On the box, the weight of this replica, I hope you can see it there, is given as 867 grams. Mine weighs more than that. It weighs just under 1 kilogram without BBs or CO2 in place. I don't know why the box gives that weight, and I'm certainly happy that this is heavier than Umarex claim. This replica comes in 3 different barrel lengths, 7.5 inch, 5.5 inch, which is what I have here, and 3.5 inch. It comes in a variety of finishes and with different grips, and there are basically 3 different versions. One that shoots 6mm airsoft BBs and one that shoots 4.5mm BBs. Both of those have smoothbore barrels. There is also a 177 pellet version with a rifled barrel. All versions are mechanically virtually identical, visually identical, so you can probably assume that this review, and this is a 4.5mm BB version, will be functionally identical to any other version of this replica. This review is slightly different to normal. Now, I've owned this for over a year now. When I first received it, I didn't really like it at all for reasons that I'll explain later. Over the course of the year, it has changed, and not because of anything that I've done. And now I like it a great deal more. So I'll be talking later on about exactly how mine has changed. This was originally released in 2015, and I also suspect that Umarex may have made some changes. When this first came out, some people weren't too impressed with it due to reliability issues and other things, and I think at least some of those may have been addressed by Umarex. So I'll also be talking about those things. Functionality is pretty good on this replica. It is, of course, single action only, so you have to manually cock the hammer for each shot. The trigger is light, crisp, very nice indeed, just what you'd hope for. The hammer also has a half-cock position, just like the original, there. You need that because in that position you can rotate the cylinder freely. You need that to load and unload shells. This loading gate on the rear opens, and with it open you can drop out the shells. They're not perfect replication of the original, they're a bit long and thin for that. And the BB fits into a plastic collar in the base of the shells. Once you've loaded up all 6, put them back in, close the loading gate, and you're good to go. There is also an ejector rod on the left side of the under barrel, and what that does is, as on the original, if you push the ejector rod, it pushes a shell out of the cylinder. You don't need it here, the shells drop out freely, but that's what the original did, and it's nice to see it replicated here. There's one thing I'm not quite so keen on, and that is that the hammer doesn't rest flush with the frame when it's fully forward. You see that on a lot of revolver replicas. I don't exactly understand why. I would certainly prefer it if the hammer was flush with the frame, but it's not a disaster. On the original, you could remove the cylinder by taking out this pin. You can't do that here. The only way to disassemble this is to take off this plate on the left side of the frame by removing several crosshead screws. You can then remove the cylinder, but be aware that there are a number of very small springs and other parts inside, so you might want to be quite cautious if you're doing that. CO2 is stored inside the grip. The grip is slightly longer than the original to accommodate the CO2. The left-hand grip lifts off to give access to the CO2 chamber. In the grip you'll find a metal hex key which you can use for tightening and piercing the CO2. That's quite nice, it means you're never looking around for a key to tighten or pierce the CO2. When the grip is reattached, there's no flex or movement in the grip at all. It feels like everything else about this replica, very solid. I mean, overall, it isn't perfect. I'd like it if the hammer sat further forward when it was down. It'd be nice to be able to remove the cylinder as you could on the original. But otherwise, this is a pretty good replication of the Colt single action army, and certainly gives you the revolver experience in a replica, which is good to see. I said at the beginning of this video that this replica has changed over time, which it certainly has. It's changed in two ways. The first is the colour. I like the way it looks now. Very dark, not quite black, almost a deep blue with blue highlights on it. But when I first received it, it didn't look like that at all. Let me show you an image of how it looked when I got it. You can see that when it first arrived, this wasn't blued, it was just blue, quite a bright blue. And I really didn't care for the way it looked. I didn't use it for some time, and I was more than a little surprised when I took it out of the box after around 6 months to discover that it looked the way it does now. I had no idea why it's changed. It's a very dramatic change. Is that blue colour designed to fade to this much darker version? Well, I'm not sure. I certainly haven't done anything to it that would have changed it. I haven't polished it, hasn't been left out in the sun. So I can't explain it. All I can say is that I like the way it looks a great deal more now than I did when I first got it. The other thing that's changed over time is the way that it shoots. When I first got it, it was very, very quiet indeed. It didn't bang at all when you pulled the trigger. There was just the sound of venting gas, and it was very, very inaccurate. I was seeing, even at 6 meters, groups of 2.5 inches with flyers going much further than that, and occasionally not even hitting a 6-inch square target. That was very disappointing, and I didn't shoot it a great deal. Over time that's changed. It now shoots much better. In fact, it's one of the most accurate BB shooters that I own. And I say again, I haven't done anything to it. I presume that in some way it took time for some parts to bed in. I'm not certain, but I can't think of any other explanation for why it would change the way that it shoots. So if you do buy one of these, well, if you get a blue one, you may want to wait and hope it'll change to a better colour. And secondly, you may want to stick with it because it might not be great out of the box, but if you do shoot it, then over time it may actually get considerably better. When this replica was first introduced in 2015, there were some fairly negative comments on it. There were a couple of major issues. The first one was that outer barrels could become loose. If that happens, obviously it negatively affects accuracy. It was possible to repair it by installing a shim, but clearly that's not something very helpful. On this one, the accuracy when I first got it with BBs was so poor that I tried shooting pellets through it. You can shoot pellets through this 4.5mm version even though it has a smoothbore barrel. I didn't find the accuracy any better with pellets, and one became jammed between the end of the cylinder and the forcing cone, and it was so distorted that I couldn't remove it simply by poking something down the barrel, so I had to disassemble this, which you do by removing this plate on the left of the frame. That then gives you access to the pins that retain the outer barrel. There is one above the barrel here, and there's another one below which is concealed until you remove this plate. As I had it disassembled, I thought I'd take a look at the inner barrel, so I drifted out the pins and discovered that I couldn't remove the outer barrel. It's so rigidly fixed into the frame that it just wouldn't move. I might have been able to drift it out, but I was concerned about damaging the finish, so I just left it in place, which suggests that perhaps this is different to the original version and it fits much more tightly into the frame. So I suspect that if you buy a later one of these, you probably won't face the loose barrel issue. The other thing that people were reporting, and it was particularly with the steel BB version, was damage to the forcing cone and the inner barrel. There are certainly some online images and videos that show very bulged and damaged inner barrels. If you have that, clearly accuracy is gone completely. It seemed like this was caused by misalignment of the cylinder when the pistol was firing, which was causing the BB to bounce against the forcing cone and bounce down the barrel, potentially causing damage. All I can say about this one is that it always cocks perfectly and that it aligns the cylinder. One way to check is that if you look down from above, you should see that the cylinder fluting is equidistant on either side of the top strap, which tells you it's aligned properly. One thing that I am aware of is that, well, mine cocks with 3 distinct clicks. Some versions of this replica cock with 4 clicks. Now that may be more accurate to the original, but it seems that the 4-click versions are more prone to firing with the cylinder misaligned. If you're thinking about buying one of these, you may want to check the cocking action and perhaps look for one that cocks with 3 rather than 4 clicks. The other issue that people mentioned was the pin on which the cylinder revolves. You can see the front of it projecting from the frame here. Apparently in original versions that was plastic and it could wear or even break. I've not handled one of those original versions, so all I can say is on this one, this pin is metal. Now all these things make me think that Umarex have probably revisited this design in light of some of the problems on the original release, and that they have changed the basic construction of this to avoid those problems. So don't be put off by those early reviews, because it seems that many of those problems, particularly the loose outer barrel, do seem to have been addressed. And certainly the version I have doesn't suffer from any of the problems that people described with the early version. Okay, finally we get to the shooting part of this test. Shooting ability is important to me in my replicas. I don't have these as wall decorations. I like target shooting and plinking at 6 meters or more, and I like my replicas to have enough power to make that fun. Umarex claim 120 meters per second for this replica, which in old money is about 395 feet per second, which sounds good. Let's run 6 shots over the chronograph and see how it actually performs. As you can see, there's a fair variation in power here between shots, and none of them were close to the Umarex claim of 395 feet per second. Some of that variation is probably due to cooldown, and it certainly does seem that the power drops as you shoot, especially if you're shooting rapidly. But there's also a lot of variation between shots. In most gas-powered replicas, or most shooting replicas, consistency of power is the key to accuracy and consistency in shooting. If you have variations in power, that often leads to variations in how the BB or pellet hits the target. Less power, it'll hit the target lower down. More power, it'll hit the target higher up. So let's take a look at how this one actually does in terms of accuracy at 6 meters. As you can see, this really isn't bad as a shooter. If I shoot carefully, I can generally get groups of around 1 inch at 6 meters, and that's as good as any BB shooter I own and better than most. The biggest problem to shooting this accurately is the sights. They're really very crude. All that you have is a groove milled into the top of the frame and a fairly thin front sight, and that gives you a sight picture where you line the front sight up with the groove. It isn't easy, it certainly isn't easy to shoot consistently. I don't mind that because that's exactly how the sights were on the original. Umarex could probably have added some adjustable sights here, but I think that would have spoiled the look of this replica. So as a shooter, I am now very happy with this. It's consistent, it's accurate within the limitation of the sights and my eyesight, and it's just much better than it was when I first got it. Back then I was lucky if I could put all 6 shots at 6 meters into a 6-inch square target. I don't know why that is. I presume it's parts bedding in over time, but whatever. 1 year after buying it, I really enjoy shooting this, and it has enough power and accuracy to be fun. If I had reviewed this replica 1 year ago, it would have been very negative. I really didn't like the way it looked. I was very disappointed in how inaccurate it was as a shooter. And it basically got put away in its box for several months without being shot. 12 months later, I really like the way it looks. The colour has changed completely, and it's now a consistent and accurate shooter. And it's also been completely reliable. I haven't experienced any of the problems that early users reported, which makes me think that probably this has been upgraded over time. If you would like to have a replica of the iconic Colt single action army revolver, you could do a lot worse than this. In fact, there aren't actually many viable options other than the Umarex version. But perhaps like me, you may have to wait to get the best out of it. If you get one of these and it doesn't shoot well, give it time, put some more rounds through it, and you may find, as I did, that it gets much better over time.